This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Well, as often as we do on this podcast, I have a special guest with me this week, Reggie McNeal. He is well known to many. I first met him in South Carolina, where he was a pastor to pastors, is what I would call him. And he's been a leadership guru for many years, still based in Columbia, South Carolina. And so welcome, Reggie.
Thank you, Richard. It's good to see you again, and to know that you've transported your life and family into the South from those cold Canadian climes where we also hung out together some.
We did. I think when I was first interacting with you, I still lived in Canada, and so now it's been a while here in the South, and I've just about got my cholesterol back under control since moving down here. So,
I understand.
Well, Reggie, this is a leadership podcast, and I've got a number of questions for you. But maybe just to begin with, just tell our listeners a little bit about your leadership journey. I'm always fascinated. I don't know how many people come out of the womb intending to be a leader, but they all have their unique journeys that get them there, that make them realize that leadership's important. And maybe what's just kind of a overall sketch of your leadership journey that has you where you are today?
Well, sure. I didn't come out of the womb with that sense, but I would say pretty early in life, around middle school, 7th, 8th grade, my peers at school somehow elected me and began electing me to student leadership roles that continued right on up through high school, and then set me on a course for political science. I wanted to be in leadership by then, and I wanted to be a public servant by then. And this is pre-Watergate, so it was still an honorable, thing to think about and pursue. But so went to school of political science. Between my junior and senior year, had a very dramatic call experience. My dad was a pastor. My two brothers were pastors. My sister's married to pastors. I mean, my dad's dad was a pastor. I mean, you understand some of that dynamic from your own journey. And so there was a sense of that I was trying to get out of the family business and, do something else. But it just wasn't, what God wanted. It was very dramatic. I could not change my trajectory at that point, to the dismay of my professors at school and all that. So went on to seminary, picked up a couple of degrees, married, and then somehow have found myself not somehow, looking back, but it's too much to go, was then positioned as the pastor of a new congregation. So founding pastor of Trinity Church in deep East Texas, Northeast Texas, and Mount Pleasant. And then after serving in that role for a decade, being called back to South Carolina, which was my home, to start up a leadership development work in the South Carolina Baptist Convention, which is where I had you come down to shepherding the conferences that we did to, take care of our pastor leaders back before a lot of people were paying attention to that, actually. And served in that capacity for 13 years and then went to Leadership Network, and there for 11, working with a lot of our larger churches in North America. And particularly in my role, it was with a missional. I was early into that world with some of my writings, and a lot of my speaking was helping the church recalibrate its mission. And that's what I felt. I literally would tell people in those days, I'm a missionary to the church. I'm trying to help the church recapture why it's the church. And so I have felt that pretty much is the basic call on my life. And so after 11 years there, that organization dissolved, and I'm currently city coach with Good Cities out of Minneapolis, where we help leaders, faith-based leaders, who really want to see kingdom results in their city. And by that, and we may talk about this later, for me, the kingdom is life as God intends. And it's the whole spectrum of life. It's the abundant life Jesus talks about. So helping people enjoy more of the life that God intends, both spiritually, but emotionally, physically, financially, whatever. So we help faith groups who have a sense of that, know how to call the party and rally others around focusing on a strategic, an initiative, a cross-domain initiative that targets a big societal community need to move the needle on it, whether it's literacy or homelessness or whatever. And along the way, of course, connected with the gospel as an expression of the gospel. So that's the pericope, I guess, of where I am, how I got
good.
here.
Well, and I know there's lots of things you didn't cover, but I know one thing that you've been big on is just the kingdom focus instead of what you call just being church centric.
Yeah.
And the church is important, and some people might even be sort of a little bit intrigued that you would not think that we should be church centric. I mean, Christ is the head of it and everything. But what's the difference? Why is it important to be kingdom focused instead of church centric, as you call it?
Well, this has been a journey for me. I didn't start there. I started deep, as I told you, deep in the belly of the beast, in the womb. I mean, church was very consuming of my family and all. And I'm not, some people read and hear what I say as being anti-church. That's not true. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm really committed to helping the church be the church that Jesus intended. And you brought him up. He's the head of the church. Well, so what is the head? What was the head thinking? All of this. So you reflect on the life of Jesus, and it dawned on me. I don't know why I was so slow to the party. He mentions church once in his ministry, and it's when he founds it. But it's against the backdrop of what he was obsessed about, because even in that founding passage, it's keys of the kingdom, that he hands out, and the kingdom is what Jesus was. That's where he came from. I mean, that's his origin. That's his frame of reference. He teaches us to pray, "Thy kingdom come," not "your church come," and that the kingdom is the power and the glory forever. And seek first the kingdom. All of this, and over 90 times, Jesus talks about kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven, or just kingdom. So, as slow as I am, when I finally realized that, I thought, wow, this is what Jesus was obsessed about. And those of us who claim to follow him, seems that we ought to be concerned about the things that Jesus, I mean, I'm married to Kathy for 44 years. If she's interested in something or concerned about something, I've been married for 44 years because I got interested about what it was that she was concerned about. So, let's just get back to what Jesus was trying to do. So I really think, he didn't just come to teach about the kingdom. He came to live it. He came to show us the life that God intends.
So if you're a pastor and you're like, okay, I've been here focusing day in and day out trying to grow my church, but now Reggie McNeal says I need to be kingdom focused. So how would that change how a pastor ministered and led?
Well, I think there are four things that would change. First of all, the story you tell. I mean, as you would be talking more, but you'd be concerned that when people come up into contact with your church, that they hear about God's kingdom, and meaning the life that God intends, not come help us build a great church. Jesus is, that's his job. But, or our church's vision, or get involved with our church, or in other words, taking them and shrinking their spiritual journey down to how they're connected to the church and how involved they are with the church and how much they participate there. But it's about helping them become viral kingdom agents so that they're infused with this kingdom story in their life and can be, can infect the people around them where they live, where they work, where they play. And so it would turn around from the focus on what we do, just not, I don't mean to do it, but instead of the focus being Sunday, the focus is what's the difference we're making Monday through Saturday, and of course you're going to keep Sunday. People hear things I don't say all the time. Of course you're going to keep gathering, but the point of the gathering is not the gathering. I mean, that would be like turning on a football program just to watch halftime. I mean, you don't play a game so you can have halftime. You have halftime so you can play a game. And the church gathering is that halftime that equips your folks to play a better game, to remember the plan. All right, so you have to change the story, but I think you have to change the scorecard. Instead of everything being about how many folks came, how much money did they bring, how often do they come, all that stuff, I think we've got to start thinking about what is the impact, what's the result. Are people living better lives because we are here? If that's the point. If Jesus said, seek first the kingdom and for the kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven, then, that's more than just conversions. That's about the quality of life that people are experiencing in the community where we are. God's not caught off guard with where you're assigned, which leads me then and so I think you would begin to, say what kind of community impact are we having? How many conversations are we, like in the spiritual scorecard, how many conversations are we having with our neighbors, intentional spiritual conversations, and with our business associates? Because I can tell you the conversion rates are never going to go up till the conversation rates go up. And so, you would begin to help people realize that all of their life is designed to help. And then it could be, I would think, in fact, all of my clients, we figure out what's the best way the church can have a community impact. Often that, whether that's feeding children or helping in literacy or dealing with the homeless situation or whatever, mental health, whatever it is, and to begin to celebrate that impact. And not just celebrate, boy, we had a great worship service. That's celebrating the halftime show. But let's talk about the game. The game is life, and it's happening out there. So I really, in a way to blend those two, I have a friend who has a part of his worship service once a month at least. He needs to do it more often, I tell him, is he has a segment of that service called 24 Hours From Now, and he interviews people from his congregation. Where are you going to be 24 hours from now? What are the needs there? What's God up to? What that's signaling is, we're here not just for here's sake, but for their sake, And then I think your sense of stewardship, I alliterate this so I can remember it, not that people need it, but your story, your scorecard, and then your stewardship. Are you just responsible for this little flock that you've been assigned, or do you feel that you have responsibility for the community where you are? And the word church, right out of the first century, was about a group of elders who who had responsibility for the community, the village where they are. And so it's not just the stewardship of, did we have a good elder meeting or ecclesia, meeting? No, it's about, again, what is our sense of, and it changes the agenda for the leader. And then structure finally and I don't start there, but sometimes I really think that we've got to expand how we think the church expresses itself. I mean, we've had basically one modality that we've worked through, 17 centuries, and that's the congregational modality. I'm not against it, but it is a unique Western kind of expression that has institutional needs and all that kind of stuff and patterns itself after organizations of similar kinds of intent. The key there is to remember that when the Christian movement was exploding, I mean, we didn't get congregational modality till second, third century. It wasn't even the first life form in the Christian taxonomy of life. I mean, the house church was of course the first thing. Now, I'm not here saying tear down the churches, let's go back to house. I'm talking about expanding the bandwidth of what we think. Of course, we're going to keep congregations, but I'm seeing church emerge in many other expressions. I'm seeing churches as restaurant. I'm seeing churches business. I've been, churches as sports bar, churches, life center, church, community development center, and I think we've got to allow for this in a kingdom modality because there are tons of people who are not susceptible to being congregationalized in our world. Either
Yeah.
they're
And
like, yeah.
I
So,
and I just see a lot of pastors that are so church centric that there could be 50 struggling churches, sister churches in the city that are all going under, and they'd feel no obligation, no concern, never not cross their mind. They maybe should walk alongside some of those and help them. And I was fortunate just growing up with my dad because he just said, if you can't celebrate anywhere where the kingdom is advancing, they're not competitors.
exactly.
We're in the same team. We're all in the same kingdom, follow the same king. So the church down the street has a breakthrough. You celebrate genuinely grateful and happy for that because your kingdom just grew at the same time. But yeah, it's unfortunately, I know a lot of pastors who act more like there's only so much market share and they're trying to
Oh,
get all they can. And but you also say something interesting in that you say there's a piece of information that every leader needs to know. What is that? What is that information?
well,
So
I
we can
think
make it
it's,
available to everybody else.
yeah, I think it's yeah. It's self-awareness. Now, I'm not talking about self-centeredness or
Hmm.
self-absorption. In fact, you get those if you're not self-aware. But I'm talking about, the ability to look at yourself and have a reckoning and a reasonable view of yourself, your impact, and of course you. What's interesting about this is you don't come to self-awareness on some kind of self-alone journey. The paradox is self-awareness requires input from other selves, from the
Mm,
people around you, and
yeah.
listen, to those things. And so, in some of my work, I just help folks think about the categories of self-awareness. I mean, I can trip off some of those. For instance, like what do we get from our family of origin in terms of our understanding of conflict resolution, or what do we get from our family of origin in terms of, our relational IQ? Do we have any emotional Velcro so people can stick to us? Our sense of boundaries, whether or not they're healthy, the internal narrative. I mean, this goodness, I'll just one example of that. How powerful! In fact, I ask people that I coach, tell me one movie or theater play or TV show or something that expresses your life. I remember asking this to a group of leaders about their church, and they said Titanic. Well, you don't
Yeah.
have to be particularly prescient as a consultant to understand they all, this sucker's going down. And so, but with individuals, that internal narrative is playing in our brains, whether we even acknowledge it or not.
Hmm.
We are living into that. Saul, the first king of Israel, never saw himself as king, I contend. That's what Samuel comes to him. And when Samuel starts, Saul had everything going for him: pedigree, gifts, talents, height, physical prowess, all that charisma, all that stuff. But but he never saw himself as king.
Mhm.
Because Samuel says, when he starts quoting God, he says, Saul, though you were small in your own eyes, I made you. You see, that was Saul's internal narrative. Now flip it, go to Israel's second king, David. Nobody else saw him as king, but in his own mind, a man after God's, the Lord's anointed. So when, I mean, when he's chosen in that regard, that's the narrative that
And,
he began to live into.
now it's interesting because you think pastors who are preaching and encouraging and teaching every week to help their people be self-aware, to recognize the truth, you'd think they'd be experts in self-awareness.
Unfortunately, too many spiritual leaders, certainly no one listening to your broadcast, but we'll just talk about the others, kind of live in a cocoon where most of the feedback is just I don't know, self-reflection, or the kind of stuff that doesn't really help them grow. There's not a commitment to that kind of development, self-development, that's really required.
Mm,
And
yeah.
sometimes it's due to hidden addictions, compulsions, our need to be loved, our need to be the hero, our need to or our workaholism or whatever. There's a whole bunch of those things that impact us.
Yeah, and I've seen insecurity. To me, is just one of the most difficult traits, things to deal with people. If they're insecure, it's really hard to help an insecure person. Because
You're
every
right.
time you try to help them, they feel threatened, put down, attacked, and it's like, I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to help set you free here, but they can't see that, and so, insecure people a lot of times will have a hard time finding ways to grow because the only
Yes.
way to grow is to confront
Yes.
stuff in their life that is holding them back, and
And
so
then they build a culture around them where no negative word, no disparaging word. And
yeah.
so, so they're just,
And I,
yeah,
I don't want to get on the theology of it all, but I've always thought it would just be very difficult to be an unmarried minister without kids, because
yeah.
if you have a spouse and kids, you will be made self-aware, whether you want to be or not,
Well,
of all your
yeah,
shortcomings, and failures will be
yeah.
front and center for you. But
Richard, you're so right. We think God gives us our kids so we can teach them, and it's just the other way around.
yeah, yeah, and you're pushed, in ways as a leader that you'd never be any other way, and they'll
Yep.
be more candid with you than most anyone of your followers would be. Well, you talk, as well, just about ending well, and, we've seen, you and I both over the years have seen lots of people start relatively
Yeah.
well, but
Yeah.
far, far fewer that end well. And
Whew.
that's been something that I've kept my eye on as I get, further and deeper into my own leadership career. And I, I was at the funeral of my parents the last couple of years. I've watched my parents end their race. What does it take if our listeners are listening in this morning and they're being challenged and to think for their own life? Well, how do I end this well? What's your advice?
Well, I have several pieces of advice, and they're all challenging.
Hmm.
I do, and when I say first of all, it doesn't mean that you have to have all this. It's not like an order. I do
Mm-hmm.
think it is important to have a sense of call, of destiny. You think about Joseph and his dream, which was aggravating, and he didn't share it, but he didn't handle that too well with his family. But it was that vision of his life and what it could be that sustained him through multiple chapters. And I find that with people that finish well, there is a long story to their life. There's like a plot. But they're chapters, but the vision of their life and their impact seems to follow, a divine plan that's pretty well
Hmm.
scripted and not something we create. So the
Yeah.
discovery of that, you don't create vision, you uncover vision, you
Mm-hmm.
discover, you seek it out. So there is a reason you're on the planet. And so figure that out. I think that's critical,
Yeah.
foundational.
Which
I
by the way, I know if your vision is simply to have a career in the church,
oh, yeah,
then you get some opposition, and you just choose another career. But if you know that Almighty God has called you to something, then it doesn't
yes,
matter how bad it gets, how hard
yes.
it is. You can abandon a career. It's a little more difficult to abandon the Lord of the universe when He's given you your assignment.
Well, and boy, I don't know how to say this. It would sound so negative, but you can tell when you're in the presence of a career church person that this just seems to be a profession that, I went into. I'm not sure I would choose that because of the pain and stuff that comes along with it. I'm thinking get
Yeah.
another profession, but boy, if there's not that security and a
Hmm.
sense, and interestingly, the people I think that make the biggest impact, in even in innovation and everything else, they're not here trying to be somebody else.
Hmm.
I mean, God's not going to ask me when I get to heaven, why weren't you more like Richard? I mean,
Hmm.
it's why Why didn't you
God
grow
knows that
into
there's only one is enough of those.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would love. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't want to be more, but the question is going to be, why didn't you grow into your own skin? Which I think is the whole life journey. Is becoming
Hmm.
who we are, and that
Yeah.
I think, speaking, I think the eschaton, we're not through here. I think this is a journey that continues. Paul talks about it a little bit. I'll be known even as I'm known. I mean, which is exciting, I think.
Mm.
But all right, so a sense of call and destiny. I also think that it's critical to have lifelong learning. In
Yeah.
other words, you got to stay limber in, what's going on. Reading, I think of Paul. Good heavens, what did Paul have to unlearn? And by the way, the unlearning curve is typically steeper than the learning curve, and it's what we need to unlearn. Like moving from church centric to the kingdom centric is an enormous unlearning. And so if we're not
Hmm.
willing to embrace those things, Paul, how would we have a Trinitarian doctrine unless he was willing to unlearn some of what he knew so well, or challenged, for him to put his head on straight? And then even at the end of his life, I mean, when he's telling Timothy, he knows he's not going to make it now. He's on death row. It's over. It's going out, and my time is up, and all. Hey, Timothy, bring the books.
Hmm. Yeah.
Here's a guy learning all the way. And then I think finally, or a third thing I would offer is you just got to have a robust relationship with God. It's that simple. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is you have to do, and there are multiple things you have to do, but not just see God as a utilitarian, someone to ask, Santa Claus, I need some help, not just a therapist, but I mean a robust
Mm.
kind of relationship with God that allows you to have the back and forth that Moses and Abraham and Peter and others had. So
Yeah. And I just found for folks like you and me who've been in it for a long time, for decades, you have to build your own network, uh,
yeah,
network of friends, of encouragers, of confidants. They don't come and volunteer for you. And I think you'd agree. The ones that I see that that drop off the quickest are the ones that are loners, that have no one speaking in their life, nobody they can really call and just say, "Can we have lunch? I'm really struggling." And it's the next thing you know, you just hear an announcement that church plant just shut down. That pastor just quit. And you're like, what happened? No one even knows. He didn't talk to anybody. And so I feel blessed and fortunate, just to have some friends I've had, but you build that yourself, even
well,
if it's
that's
just healthy routines,
yes.
exercise, just growing, learning, reading. But the ones that are going strong right to the end are the ones who just very intentionally built around them a support network of that keeps them healthy and fresh and stretched, and the ones who aren't reading, aren't growing, aren't attending the pastors' meetings locally just to just get some companionship. It's never surprising when they drop by the wayside.
Boy, that's so insightful, and it is in a huge part of the enemy's strategy.
Yeah,
That's to isolate us because we're
yeah.
so much more vulnerable to everything, disappointment, discouragement, as well as sin. I remember early on in my life as a pastor, uh, a, a well-known Christian leader went down, with an affair, but he said to a group of us that met with him as he was re-entering ministry after he'd put himself under a year of accountability and learning. You see, that's a smart way to do it. He didn't just trudge on, well, God will forgive me.
Mhm.
But he told us, and there were about a dozen of us, he said, if I had had a male friend, I'm confident I would not have had the affair
Mm.
that took my ministry away at that point.
Mm.
So your insight is very profound.
Yeah, it's always surprising to me, especially pastors, but leaders in general. They're all around people all the time, but then you're almost shocked to discover how many are lonely. That that don't have friends, and you'd think, but that's what you're a pastor, like you're everybody's friend. They all look at you that way, but then you don't look to anyone yourself and feel like, but this is someone that genuinely cares about me. But
And I had professors in seminary who would say things like, you can't have friends in your congregation. I'm going, that just doesn't make sense to me.
yeah,
I mean, if you can't be friends with the people you're doing your life with, um, it was one of
yeah,
the greatest joys for me when I left the local pastor, to pastor pastors and all, that there were some people from that experience that still wanted to be friends. I wasn't just a tool in their box either,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so, and my best friends have come, from doing life together there. And so
Hmm.
you're right. I also
Yeah, and
think,
I think we could do a whole nother podcast on
oh,
bad advice that has been commonly given in the ministry.
yeah.
And because I was told the same thing, and yet I just thought, you know what? As much time as I put into the church, I don't have anymore. I don't have available time outside to be going to some club somewhere or going to some, a neutral place somewhere. If I'm not finding friends in the church, I'm not going to be a lot of other places. Or friends, even in your community, but just where you're living your life and doing your life, you got to have your
Absolutely.
friends there. So,
Well, listen to the integrity I think that implies, because that means you've been able to be scrutinized. Was it Emerson that said, "A friend is someone who knows you and loves you anyway"?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, you have to be willing and vulnerable. But
And
I
I
know,
find, Reggie, that that's the difference between a career minister and a
yeah,
shepherd is a shepherd loves the flock. And I don't know how you could love your people and not become friends with them.
I
It's sort
know,
of, it just seems like it's just inevitable. You can't keep loving people and not view them as your friends
yeah,
and develop relationship. But well, there is so much. Reggie has written a lot of books and good ones. I've used some in doctoral ministry seminar that I teach on leadership. I've used that as a resource, and we'll put all those in the show notes so you can check out Reggie and just see how to benefit from all of, that he's written and that he does. And if you want to reach out to him, even just to speak or to coach you or whatever it might be. Reggie is just a wealth of wisdom and insight, and I'd really recommend you to do that. And so, Reggie, I knew that our time would go by very quickly.
yeah.
There's a lot to talk about in this field, but Reggie's one of those who's got a lot of insight, and so I really appreciate just getting to reconnect with you.
Yeah, it's been great, Richard. Thank you. You're right. Boom. I mean, I guess if I just loved to talk more, it would have been.
Yeah, if I could just get you out of your shell.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I encourage you, check him out, check out his books. They're all good. They're all going to make you think. And Reggie, again, just thank you. And I pray that from this, I just know that there'll be a lot of folks who are encouraged and inspired today.
Thanks, Richard. That's what matters.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.